Hi, I'm going to be talking about Chapter 10 from Theories of Human Communication today, and this focuses on health contexts. It takes some of the theories we've already looked at from the previous chapters about communication and puts them within a context of healthcare. It also introduces a few different theories that we haven't discovered yet. The first thing that caught my eye was the role of narratives within a healthcare context. An example of this, I think, would be the lack of healthcare education, how it relates to poverty groups and minority groups. A trend that we see is people who are in minority groups are much more likely to be under the poverty line, and they often don't have access to the same healthcare that people of higher incomes have. This is a social issue, but I believe it's also a communication issue, because a lot of times the effects of poor healthcare, such as a higher obesity rate and underweight, childbirth, a lot of these can be traced back to lack of information transfer from people who are giving out healthcare education and people in poverty. There's miscommunication between those two groups. I think can be solved with some of the theories that we're studying now. For an example, I think something we could really do to improve this issue would be to focus on how to use the narratives that we've looked at to better communicate healthcare issues and how to take care of oneself to people in poverty. I think it makes it more applicable to them, and it also, these people have a lot of problems. Being in poverty is a really tough life, and it's very hard to determine what's most important to focus on when you're fighting a battle of poverty every single day. I think a good real world example of this would be, I know mothers, when you sign up for government assistance and you have a child, you're given a free breast pump and you have to come to the office and collect it. I think at that time it's a good idea to put in maybe books about motherhood and maybe a different version of these books that have written it in the form of a narrative of a mother, a struggling mother who doesn't have this support system, and how she chooses to make healthcare decisions for her and her baby. I think that makes it hit home a little more, and also helps people determine what's most important when they're getting ready for their child to come. Is it vitamins, supplements, what they need to be eating, how do they need to be treating their body? These are things they might not have access to without that connection between healthcare education and their lives. Another theory that I thought was really interesting in this chapter was the theory of motivated information management, or TMIM. I think it's really similar to the uncertainty theory that we've previously studied. That's the theory where you're trying to limit the amount of uncertainty you have when you walk into a conversation or you start an active communication. You want to understand what's going on and be able to respond to the best of your knowledge, and you want to leave there with more certainty and more understanding than you came into the conversation with. And this theory looks at how we synthesize information in a conversation, and how we decide to seek information or to reject it. And there's 3 phases to this process. First, there's an interpretation phase that shows you kind of weigh what's the level of uncertainty in this situation. Then there's an evaluation phase where you're looking at what are the pros and the cons of me going out and seeking more information on this topic. And then you also want to decide, can you seek enough information on this topic to make you feel more certain than you were before? And finally, there's a decision phase, where you're ultimately deciding whether to seek or reject the information. You want to be able to seek relevant information. You want to avoid irrelevant information. And there's something called cognitive reappraisal, which is you look at the perceived level of importance of this issue, and that helps you make your decision. And you want to know what's the meaning of the uncertainty. Is it applicable to my life? Is the uncertainty going to make me feel worse, or is that something that I won't be bothered by? And so I thought I'd walk through this in sort of a real world context. Let's say you're having a conversation with your dermatologist, and she presents some findings that she recently looked up about how sunlight exposure could cause cancer. I would interpret what she says by thinking how much I would know about skin cancer and evaluate if I wanted to know more or not, if I wanted to seek more information on what she's saying, or if I wanted to reject it and change the subject. I would also evaluate if I ask more, would she want to know about my history with tanning beds? That might make me feel guilty or uncomfortable about my lifestyle choices in the past, so I wouldn't want to bring that up because it would bring up more uncertainty. And also, I need to figure out if the risk of me not knowing if I have skin cancer would be too much, and I just wouldn't want to bring it up because it would just open up sort of Pandora's box of uncertainty and make me feel more uncomfortable and more anxious. And finally, when I make my final decision on whether I'm going to talk to my dermatologist in greater length about skin cancer, I want to figure out how important is this issue. To me, it would be very important for me to know if I was at risk for cancer or not. So I would cast aside sort of my anxiety around the uncertainty of it, and I would still ask her because I weighed the importance within the conversation. And I would want her to use her knowledge to help me leave the conversation with less uncertainty about my situation. Overall, I think this chapter was really interesting. I had a previous edition of this book and it didn't include this chapter, so I had to do a little bit extra research, but I think it was really important that they decided to include this because I think a lot of communication does have very real-world applications, and in this case, it can be even life or death, and I think that's really important